Hi, my name is Aneri Pradhan, and I'm co-founder of Climatic Group, a firm that's focused on scaling climate technologies. Our Climatic Scale podcast showcases solutions from entrepreneurs and industry leaders on what it really takes. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Dominic Campanella, founder of Concular, a pioneering company enabling circular construction by giving new life to building materials. We'll talk about his founder journey, the challenges of scaling circular solutions, and what it takes to transform an entire industry. Welcome, Dominic.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks a lot for the invitation. Great to talk to you.
Absolutely. So, just to kick us off, what inspired you to start Concular?
Yeah, so I'm actually not from that field. So I'm having a background in computer science and management. And what I discovered, like I worked after my studies a couple of years for Google, and I discovered that actually I'm quite privileged because I had a really good education and got also amazing experiences in such companies such as Google. But I didn't use the privilege for the biggest challenge in our time, which is the climate crisis. And that's why I thought, okay, as I'm so privileged, I should use it to do something good for our society and for our world. And I did know like my two co-founders already, and one of them is architect, and he basically was on one construction site and saw that a lot of materials are going out because this building was getting demolished. And one street further in another project, the same materials were put in a new building, but not the ones who just got demolished, but new produced materials. And then there was the idea like, okay, why you don't use the materials one street further because they're still in a really good condition. And this is where the idea from Concular was born that we have to basically create a material loop so that materials coming out from the construction have to be in new construction projects again. And this is what we then started now almost 6 years ago. And yeah, with that, we save a lot or million of materials and tons of materials every year and hopefully make a contribution to fight the climate crisis.
Absolutely. It's such a cool circular solution that you and your co-founders have created. What is the core problem in the construction industry that Concular is solving?
Yeah, so basically, I would say it's not even a core problem of the construction sector, but a core problem of the climate crisis, because the construction sector is by far the largest polluter in the world. So 6% of all waste is coming from that. So it's great that we in Germany at our homes are recycling or putting it in different bins, our waste. But the largest amount of waste is coming actually from the construction site, and there's not different bins, and we don't recycle that much or not in a high way, but it's very often landfill burned or something else or downcycled. And so there we have a huge waste problem. But on the other side, also a huge CO2 problem because 40% of all CO2 emissions are coming from the construction sector. So this is a lot. It's by far the largest polluter in the world. And half of these emissions are the operational energy, so the heating and so on. And we talked the whole time about energy efficiency. And this is great. And we also made some progress there because here the CO2 emissions are decreasing. But which we didn't look at is the other half. So 20% of all global CO2 emissions, which is the production of construction materials, the embodied carbon. And here, the problem is we take valuable resources, we produce materials, put them into our buildings, and sometimes after just a couple of years, we take these really valuable materials, which are in a good condition, and we throw it away. As I just explained, we throw it away, and one street further, the same materials are put it in. And so this take make waste principle leads to a lot of waste and a lot of CO2 because you have to produce it always new. And this is the problem. So you can say the climate crisis is decided on construction site, and when you really want to solve it, you have to think about getting these materials back into the loop in a high value recycling or reuse. This has to be done, and this is what we want to solve because otherwise we cannot fight the climate crisis.
And I think there's a cost too to landfilling
Yes.
the materials. Can you explain that cost?
Yeah, of course, filling is very expensive in Germany and also in a lot of other countries because we don't build landfills anymore. And so that also means that sometimes for some specific construction materials coming out of buildings, you have to drive 500 kilometers to landfill. You have to think about it. You take materials out in high quality, then you drive 500 kilometers to put it at the landfill where it's gone. And for example, we from Concular, we don't think this is a waste, but this is actually a value because what you can do with the materials is you can take it, you might have to refurbish it, sometimes even not that, and then you can put it in another building. And what happens then is you don't have to pay for the landfilling anymore, but you get money for putting it into another building. And I think this is amazing because there's only winners. So the environment wins, the building owner can save up to 30% of the deconstruction costs, which can be a lot of money. And also the new building owners can win because they can also get the materials cheaper. The only ones who are not winning are the landfills, but they are closing, they are full, so they also don't want these materials anymore. I think this is actually what we want to do at Concular is not only the environmental impacts, 95% CO2 emissions are getting reduced, but also the economically impact. And both has to be work together. If this is not the case, this will not, I think a company in our current times cannot live if it's not economically and ecologically feasible.
Yeah. So can you walk us through how Concular works from deconstruction to reuse?
Yes. So basically, our target group are building owners, public and private. So half of our clients are public, half private. And we talk about a bit larger buildings. And so they're coming to us. Either they have a deconstruction, renovation, or even a new building, or want to build a new building. And if we have a deconstruction or a renovation, we go into that building way before the deconstruction happens, sometimes 6 months or even longer before. And then we do a pre-deconstruction audit, which is basically we look what kind of materials are in the building. It's a rough survey, basically digital. And then we know what materials are in the building. And then what we do is match that supply with the demand in new buildings or back to the manufacturers or even like into our storage facilities and so on. And so if then the deconstruction happens, we can either do the whole deconstruction or we just deconstruct the materials which we sold. Take the materials, we have mining hubs, these are storage facilities where we can refurbish them. They are all over Germany. And then we put it into a new building or back to the manufacturers. And then with that, we close the loop. And on the other side, if someone has a new building to build, we can consult them. We can help them to find the materials they need to put it in their buildings. And then, of course, so this is like the physical level. And then we have the digital level, which is basically the whole software, which is supporting that. And you can do like life cycle assessments and so on. So basically, you can summarize that if someone is coming to us, we help them to bring in circularity in their projects, but not by increasing the complexity, but reducing it, because otherwise you cannot be successful. And so you get a complete solution, a holistic solution from A to Z. If you want to just have the materials, if you want to have the deconstruction, if you want to have construction, we can do everything. As we are 70 people, we are all around Germany and also Austria. So we are now at the level where we can really fulfill a lot of the requirements of our clients.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. And I love the kind of end-to-end process you've created. I'm thinking about the scaling issue because you can't deconstruct or implement this process for every single building in the entire world. So how does it scale as an industry?
Yeah, I think this is a really good question. And so looking into the next years, I think, first of all, there's some really important regulation coming up, especially on the European Union side. So we have the EPBD, so Energy Performance for Building Directive, which is implementing so-called CO2 limits. Basically, in the future, you can only build buildings if they're not above a certain CO2 limit per square meter. And to fulfill it, you have to work with low CO2 materials. And reuse, for example, is 0 kilo CO2. Or you can also use bio-based and so on. What that means is that there must be a solution to source a lot of these reused materials. On the other side, there will be regulation saying that every building in the European Union has to have a discrete deconstruction audit before the deconstruction. Meaning, with the one regulation, you will have a higher demand. With the other, you will have a higher supply. And then the question is like how it's getting together. And what we think is there will be, or we can see that actually already in other countries like France and Denmark who already introduced that regulation. You can see what happens is that manufacturers will not manufacture in the classical way anymore. They will not getting their raw material like from our soil or our earth, but they get it from buildings who are already built. So there is a process that basically the materials are coming from the deconstruction site to the manufacturer site. They have their own refurbishment lines. They refurbish it and bring it into and sell it as a new product or a reclaimed product again. So then there will be also special companies only focusing on, as said, like France, Belgium. There are companies only focusing on, for example, partition walls or flooring material or bricks. And so they are basically manufacturer, but not in a classical way. They're only doing it with reclaimed materials. And I think this is how we can get to scale if there's specific companies for specific materials where you can buy it as you would buy a new material. And yeah, this is where the industry is going. We see it in other countries. In Germany, as we did not introduce the regulation, we did not see it. And I think this is also a big risk because other countries see this as an opportunity because they introduced it earlier, so their industry can now adapt slowly to it because it's a roadmap, a reduction roadmap, meaning like it's getting less the CO2 limits every 2 years. The earlier they start, the less the steps will be. Also meaning Germany will introduce it, but as the industry is not prepared, that means that the products will come from France or from Belgium or Denmark, which is great for the European Union, but not so great for the German manufacturers. So they have to now, actually they are tasked now to do something. Otherwise, they will not exist anymore in a couple of years. But this is how it will work. And it will work on a European level because we have a lot of standardized products. It doesn't matter if you have a product in Spain or in Germany, they are harmonized. And so, yeah, there will be a large scale in the next, I would say, 5 years.
Yeah, so what I'm really hearing from you is that regulation is very critical to really scaling circular construction. And I know I've heard from so many people that the construction industry in general is very risk averse, very slow, really tough to work with, and that regulation is really the push needed to drive change because it won't come from them. I'm curious to hear your take on that as a company that sells their solution to the construction industry. What have you learned about driving adoption in such a traditional sector?
Yeah, so the construction sector is by far the most conservative and less digitized sector. Like there's a lot of studies also. They are like on the same level as the agriculture sector. So you have to imagine if you go out and see like how less digitized it is. And the conservatism in the construction sector, the reason for that is also it's very large projects, hundreds of millions sometimes. And if there's any mistake, that costs a lot of money. So they're really risk averse. But this also means that innovation is not taken because you just do it in a way as it is established because you don't want to get the risk so that you can lose a lot of money. And I think the biggest point to get here a good foot into the market is to build reputation, to have really good partners, to have really good networks. So you can only be successful in the market if you really have projects where you can show that it worked. And so we are very happy that from the beginning we had some smaller projects where we could show that it works and it's also economically feasible. And with that, you can go to the next company and tell them, so we did it already. And so you build trust and you build also reputation by talking to a lot of people, creating a network. But you always have to signal, like, give you an example with the materials itself. A lot of people went to us and said, okay, it's really nice that you're doing that. But what happens when there's a damage of the material? We as a company, we can just give a warranty. And if there's a damage, we just have to take care about it. So that's completely normal. But that's not enough for them. So they still didn't trust us as much. So what we did was we went to the largest insurance company in Germany, VHV-Versicherung, and we created an insurance specifically for reclaimed materials. And also, this is not needed, just the signaling. We have an insurance for that, which is a manufacturer doesn't have an insurance, but we have one. So we're even better. helped us to sell more materials, to bring more materials into the loop. And so you have to work on these elements of trust. You have to really listen what's the problem. And yeah, so you have to always be better than the alternative. So we should not be the same as a new material. We have to be better and way better. So less CO2, lower price, and better insurance. And only with this arguments you are able to sell it. And this you have to think about it. So it's a really hard field to be in, but there's a lot of opportunities if you put a lot of effort in, especially the reputation building.
Yeah, that's a brilliant example. And I imagine it would be very interesting for any startups in the built environment sector to hear from you, because I don't know if insurance is the first thing they think of when they're building their companies, but
Yeah.
it seems like an incredibly effective strategy, even if it's not even used, just to offer that to reduce the risk for such a risk-averse industry.
Exactly. It's also with the pre-construction audit, and we did that a lot, and we created our own methodology. But the construction companies or the building owners, they were not that eager to do it. But we saw then, okay, how can you scale that for the 20,000 deconstruction projects in Germany every year? And then we just saw, okay, the construction sector is just following always DIN standards. Also, there's no reason, there's no legal requirement to follow DIN standards, but they're just doing it. So then we just also created a DIN standard for the pre-deconstruction audits, and now it's widely adapted in the industry. So there's hundreds of projects every year, just because there's a standard, but there's no legal obligation. And so you have to think a bit out of the box and think about like because especially in the construction sector, you cannot start building a new process. You have to adapt to the current process. And this is, I think, a secret to be successful, not to create more complexity, but to integrate in the current complexity and make it easier.
Yeah, amazing advice. So what's next for Concular in the next 12 to 24 months?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So I think the German market is still something, there's a lot of movement here. And of course, what our main goal is that if there's a construction, you don't think about doing this construction circular, but by definition, by default, construction is circular. As you don't think about today, so if you build a new building, you don't think about energy efficient building windows or the insulation. You do it because it's normal. Why do you have to think about circularity? And we want to have being at that point. Not sure if that will happen in the next 12 to 24 months, but what we will do is we will further develop our physical infrastructure, so storage facilities and so on. We will further invest into our digital infrastructure so that this is all linked. And yeah, combining that, trying to scale that, and trying to combine it with the upcoming regulation, and trying to also influence the regulation, because as you said, like the regulation is very important for us. I completely agree. And so we have to lobby, because there's a lot of associations, interest groups lobbying. So they only have to lobby that the status quo is just there. So it's much easier than to change something in the regulation. So we have to lobby in a positive way to change something. And this is also a large focus of Concular, to show it works and to show to politicians now is the time, and not see a regulation as something which is a burden, but as something which is an opportunity. And this, I think, is very important. So building further our infrastructure and combining that with a good regulation. And then, of course, sharing our knowledge also to a lot, because we think the market is big, so everyone should adapt it. Our pre-construction audit methodology is free for everyone. We publish a lot of guidebooks and so on, and in the hope that a lot of more companies are doing that, and the market is bigger, because then we can together have a large movement to make the standard.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, it's great that you are publishing all this so that others can also adopt and not reinvent the wheel. And so if someone's listening, wants to help accelerate circular construction, how do they find these materials from you?
So they can just go to our website, concular.de, and then there we have a section called knowledge. Unfortunately, the website is in German, but you can translate it to English. And there we have all our publications. You can just download it, or you can also search for pre-deconstruction audits on Google, and then you can download it for free. Yeah, and just use it. So we don't have a copyright on that, but we're always happy if others are using it. And I said that is happening now a lot. And not only in Germany, but for example, pre-deconstruction audits, this standard is now used in more than 8 countries in the European Union. And this is really nice to see, that there's a small movement and others are just taking it and doing it and maybe improving it. And so I like really the idea of a collaborative movement where there's not this competition, but more let's do it together.
Absolutely. And also, what are you looking for now? How can the audience help?
I think very important is because I would say if you go now on the street and ask a random person what is the largest polluter in the world, they would not say the construction sector. So they would say aviation, which is around 3% or whatever. But I think we have to raise much more awareness that there is a huge issue in the construction sector and that we have to do something. Also, the large public society has to know it. And so we must be very aware about that. So this is spread the word that there is on the one side that there is a large challenge, but there's also a solution. And I think it would be great to inspire others also to go into the sector to also do something. So because there's not a lot of companies, startups trying to really do something environmental in the construction sector, as there are some challenges, but you can solve that. And for Concular, just spread the word and use also what we published, do something with it, create your own company, create your own initiative, connect with each other. And I think that would be really nice. And of course, also look at the regulation, look that you also push for better regulation, go to your local politician, tell them about that. And I think this is the most important part right now.
Amazing. Dominic, thank you so much for sharing your journey and insights. Concular's work is a great reminder that innovation isn't just about new sustainable materials, but reimagining the value of what already exists. For our listeners, you can learn more about Concular at concular.de or connect with Dominic Campanella on LinkedIn. Climatic Scale is a podcast about accelerating climate technologies and solutions. You can listen and find more episodes on Apple Podcasts, our Substack, and also Spotify. Thank you again, Dominic.
Thank you.